In today's world, we are connected to so many different things at our fingertips. A world that's able to transport people and goods and information in a relatively routine manner. My name is Baruch Abraham. I am the manager for the Advanced Concepts branch within the FAA's NextGen organization, specifically in the Technology Development and Prototyping division. These remarks are really going to be focused on highlighting the work we've been doing, the great progress we've been making in realizing this future of urban air mobility, where we're really able to take advantage of and introduce a whole new concept, a new set of capabilities, and open up a new aviation market to areas that we don't serve today. My interest in aviation started when I was a kid. My mom used to work for an airline. We used to make it a point to get out to the airport. I remember my brothers and I going out there and playing, exploring, and just amazed at watching airplanes. After high school is when I tried a demonstration flight on a small Cessna 152. And after that, I was hooked. So I went to school, finished my undergraduate degree in aviation, where I was able to earn my commercial and flight instructor certificates. And after that, I really got interested in helicopters. So I joined the Army. I flew Blackhawks in the Army for 7.5 years on active duty. Aviation, it's a fairly young industry, considering in just over 100 years that it's existed. It's gone from an industry that was used primarily by the rich and the elites back 100 years ago to now an industry that's open to everyday people like us. It's become more affordable. It has become more accessible. It's opened up the world to us. There is still a piece of our day-to-day lives and a piece of the world market that is underserved by aviation. If you look at urban areas where we still are very much reliant on transportation on the ground, trains, the metro, or bicycles, traveling by foot. And in a lot of cases, we're actually just sitting in traffic for hours and hours as part of our daily commute. You don't see aviation in that urban area, in that urban environment. The problem in our cities is congestion. That congestion has continued to grow to a point where most of us are spending hours a day going either direction as part of our daily commutes. But aviation can potentially open that environment and potentially introduce a new way of traveling that can alleviate that traffic congestion, that can help improve our day-to-day lives by giving us more time to do what we need to do rather than sitting in traffic. We really can't be skeptical of these technologies anymore. They are not that far in our future. We were asked to participate in Uber Elevate, and at that time that was Uber's second such conference, seeing the vision that Uber had, how they were connecting the data. They're able to really map out, for example, in the city of Los Angeles, where people travel at certain times of the day, so they could have really data-driven approach to, hey, we are moving people from these areas to these areas at these times, and it takes us X amount of time. Here are the variables that play a role in that. That was really when the light bulb went off in my head. You know, industry recognizes an opportunity. They've identified a market to serve. They have approached this with a data-driven analysis to obviously justify that there is a valid business case for them in there. And our role is to make sure that we support their realization of these ideas from an airspace and air traffic management perspective. And to that, we have to understand what their operations mean, how they intend to operate, and what those implications are on air traffic management as we know it now. that airspace still has to continue to accommodate operations as we know them today. Traditional helicopters operating at lower altitudes, general aviation aircraft and airplanes going in and out of smaller airports closer to the city centers, or whether that be the law enforcement, public safety operations that are also taking place in the airspace around it. Unless we really do think forward and we are proactive in our approach to these ideas, to these solutions that will be needed to incorporate these urban air mobility operations and other new entrants, really, what will end up happening is that we will significantly hinder growth in these industries. We will significantly limit our ability to leverage the national airspace system as an asset, whether that's for economic growth, our global standing, unless we're able to adapt to our changing world and environment. The US will be left behind. The US and the FAA have been leaders, and a lot of other countries look to us to follow. We are also very much, and rightly so, cautious. We look at new issues and new challenges with a critical eye, and that's absolutely still the reason why we are the safest airspace system in the world. We still also have to balance and evolve with the world around us, whether it's the industry that's looking to grow in this area in urban air mobility or other new entrant type of operations. Unless we are actually able to incorporate them while still maintaining our safe and efficient national airspace system, they will look to other markets. They will look to other areas where it may be easier for them to get to. We have to have a paradigm shift from using air traffic controllers and our traditional air traffic services as a way to manage traffic. We have to look to creative solutions. We have to look to new ideas. In NextGen, we started an engagement with our partners at NASA. What we didn't want to do is make assumptions about what we thought urban air mobility would look like, what the transition would be, what type of technologies would be in place, when they would be available, what the use cases were. We were able to participate in one-on-one listening sessions where we had industry stakeholders representing aircraft manufacturers, operators, service providers, and some local city officials that gave us a perspective of their role, their vision, and their objectives. We were able to truly get an idea of what these operations could look like. Everybody saw themselves realizing their visions differently. Some operators were looking for a market that is strictly looking at moving people. Some operators saw their objectives as carrying large cargo. Some envisioned a world where people are able to fly their own personal aircraft that are easy to operate, highly automated. Some saw a world where unmanned aircraft are able to carry passengers from rooftop to rooftop. All these different types of operations still would need to operate in the same environment, but they all introduce a level of intricacy, a level of challenge that has to be overcome. The common element in all of this was a recognition that these instrument and visual flight rules as they exist today will just not be adequate to address the need. There is some need for a new way of thinking, a new way of approaching air traffic management. We have to start with defining the concept of operation. We need a common reference so that when we're talking about urban air mobility, we're all talking about the same thing. Through not only the one-on-one discussions, but follow-on discussions, we pulled together stakeholders from aviation safety, subject matter experts and stakeholders from air traffic organization, as well as our partners at NATCA. And through scenario-driven discussions, we were able to talk through the different elements and the common elements we heard. We were then able to put that into a set of assumptions and principles that would guide what would be a concept of operation. Earlier this year in the spring, we developed an initial concept of operation that envisions the initial state of urban air mobility as we see it along the progression steps. And that's truly a reflection of all these different stakeholder engagements we had and what we heard. It describes the initial state, the initial set of operations that are envisioned. It's not going to be a a light switch or a revolution where we wake up one day and we're going to have all these unmanned aircraft carrying people flying overhead. It's going to be an incremental process. A methodical transition from the current rules and the current types of aircraft we're used to seeing to that world. And that first step is still operations with pilots on board. And we'll start with urban areas with lower density of operations, and then slowly migrating from that to increasing levels of density, increasing levels of complexity, maybe with regard to the types of airspace we may be operating within. So that is where we start introducing the notion of corridors that is included in the concept. These corridors are meant to be a way to separate aircraft that are operating within the current air traffic rules and procedures versus those that are going to be operating within what we envision are those tailored rules. Within these corridors, the idea is that there will be performance requirements that would be defined, that would be made known, and aircraft operators, pilots that are able to meet these performance requirements are able to operate within these corridors without the need to interact with air traffic control and air traffic services. In a way, it's a further maturation and growth of current helicopter routes and VFR corridors we're familiar with in some areas. But the difference being that we start introducing tailored flight rules or community-based rules to strategically and tactically separate aircraft from one another. And the idea of these corridors is that they are also known to all stakeholders, so that those that are looking to operate within them and or those that are looking to operate outside of them know where they are. So we will be working towards ways to identify how these corridors are then made to be known. Any aircraft that are looking to operate within these corridors or traverse these corridors, the idea is then they would have to meet whatever performance requirements that would be in place. And these performance requirements could be things similar to the ability to share intent. So aircraft have to make their intent known, so others that are within the corridors or also crossing those corridors would be aware and would be able to avoid them. And the ability to share intent and other information that's needed to make sure that we're safely and efficiently deconflicting aircraft are also enabled through providers of services for UAM or PSUs. Those PSUs are those entities that are really at the heart of the architecture we envision. And that information exchange architecture with those PSUs in the middle enables the operator to share their intent with their respective PSU. And those PSUs are able to look across their own set of operations as well as across the network of PSUs to identify potential conflicts where aircraft may be looking to occupy the same space in the same time. So they could strategically deconflict these operations through negotiations, as well as those PSUs could also have additional services that support tactical separation that could potentially augment tactical separation technologies that may be on board the aircraft, or they may be able to provide technologies and ground-based infrastructure that is able to provide surveillance and support the need for tactical separation. These PSUs that are also potentially in some ways unique or a variation of the service providers that provide services at lower altitude for UTM are also able to exchange information. So USSs for UTM and PSUs are also able to exchange information through this network environment so that all operations that are being serviced by these entities are safely deconflicted. The notion of the PSUs and the USSs may be similar in nature, but we recognize there may be some added requirements and added functions and services that the UAM service providers may have to consider. We have intentionally given them separate names, but by all means, USSs could evolve or could certainly meet the requirements to be a UAM PSU, or vice versa, a PSU being able to also service small UASs in the UTM environment. When we look to these new ways and new ideas of enabling operations in a cooperative environment, that doesn't mean the FAA is giving up its regulatory authority. The FAA, by all means, still maintains its role as a regulator. We set the regulatory framework that will enable the implementation of these community-based rules. The FAA still maintains its oversight responsibility to make sure that the rules that are in place are complied with and the appropriate level of safety and efficiency requirements are being met through a broader regulatory framework. But it will allow that flexibility through those tailored flight rules and the use of the community-based rules. Throughout the progression from what we do today to that future world, that far-term view where we truly realize these technologies as part of our day-to-day lives, what we have to still maintain and what we have to understand is that the national airspace is an asset, it's a resource, and one that has to be made available in a fair and equitable way. So that means that when we are looking for ways to enable these new operations, when we're looking for ways to have urban air mobility continuing to mature, we still have to make sure that we address the needs and we continue to enable safe and efficient operations of traditional air traffic or traditional aircraft, whether that be helicopters or fixed-wing airplanes that would be flying at those same altitudes. So we're not looking to take airspace away from those. We're trying to make sure that we incorporate them in a way that is safe and equitable. From the opposite perspective, we can't also just look at the current operations and say, well, because these new operations or because urban air mobility does not fit into the current paradigm of air traffic management, that we shouldn't allow it or we should close the door on that, because that's also not fair and equitable to those new operations. So we have to find that balance. We have to find a way to ensure that however we implement these new procedures, these new rules, and these new operations, we maintain the airspace as fair and as equitable as possible. We still have to maintain our responsibility and we still have to keep the FAA's objective of meeting the highest levels of safety standards. Especially now when we're talking about these disruptive technologies that are looking to operate in the national airspace, we have to make sure we still maintain the safety and integrity of the national airspace system. That means that we have to make sure that all these incremental steps we're taking towards incorporating these new operations still meets that high level of scrutiny and requirements from a safety perspective. How we incorporate them has to be so that it does not introduce so much inefficiency or does not cause inefficiencies in the system where our existing operations and services would suffer. We have to make sure that we balance those. But we also cannot be so close-minded to allowing these operations where we are limiting innovation. We still have a national airspace system to manage that has to be an equitable asset to all those that are looking to take advantage of it. And our responsibility is to make sure we incorporate all operations and enable those operations in a manner that is safe and efficient. We are going to address those ideas and come up with potential solutions to address those gaps and continue progressing towards the implementation. We've realized a lot of these new ideas and capabilities, and there's some that we're continuing to work on to make sure that we are keeping up with technology, to make sure we're keeping up with the demand, to make sure we're keeping up with the needs of our workforce. Looking beyond the next 10 years, we fully expect a world that is an operational environment, a national airspace system that is made up of commercial airline operations, the regionals, the business jets, the general aviation, and all those that we're used to seeing every day. But on top of that, this growing industry in small drones, small UAS operations, in urban air mobility, commercial space operations, commercial operations in the upper class E airspace, where we're truly taking advantage of the national airspace system with more diverse set of operations and more new users, new entrants, technology giants that are truly new to the environment. Advancements in battery power are enabling us to harness energy, store it, and use it for longer durations. How common electric vehicles have become in our day-to-day lives. It highlights how far technology has gone when we're talking about the use of battery power and electrical power. So that combined with advancements in our ability to utilize lighter material to manufacture aircraft really helps us realize this future of quieter, cleaner, lighter vehicles that are able to truly get us to that environment and that future that we've seen in science fiction movies and books, where we have vehicles routinely flying over our heads and over cities to truly carry passengers or goods in a safe and efficient manner. And fortunately, we don't have to look far for the purpose of air mobility, because we've already been working these issues over the past few years to address the UAS traffic management needs. We heavily rely on the idea of using these third-party service providers, and a lot of that could potentially translate and support what we're talking about, our objective of minimizing workload on our controllers. Once we actually realize these ideas and these capabilities we're talking about, they will not only be able to connect us to different parts of urban areas in a relatively quick manner. The small drones and other unmanned aircraft are also able to operate in that similar environment to provide services and goods to our doorsteps. You can imagine food delivery, or right now we have the benefit of same-day package delivery, but you can envision a future it could be within hours that you get your package delivery, potentially within minutes, depending on the types of infrastructure that is set up to support what we're talking about. So we'd really have a lot of goods and services at our fingertips. It can truly enable us to avoid these long congestions, sitting in hours of traffic. It's really able to connect us from our doorsteps through this multimodal environment where we can potentially walk to a bicycle stand, we can pick up a rideshare bicycle, ride it to a metro station, take a train somewhere, hop out, take a ride share for the next segment to a vertiport or to a UAM aerodrome, and then from there flying from one spot to the next hub, and truly like in a multimodal environment, get us from point A to B in a more efficient manner while reducing congestion and saving us time. There's a risk in the US falling behind the current air traffic management paradigm as we know it today. It's going to hinder innovation because the rules and the technologies and the processes and the procedures are really meant to support traditional air traffic operations. Look beyond what we know for air traffic management. Look beyond the traditional world that we're used to living in for aviation. Imagine aviation in the same way you imagine your cell phone from 10 years ago to now. Imagine a world where we can do things better. Be open-minded, continue to get involved, whether it's to continuing to support the ongoing research, continuing to represent your respective organizations, continuing to represent your respective businesses through standards development bodies, through ongoing research, and just keep an eye out for this industry to continue to grow. I truly can't express how grateful I am to be able to work in this area in this day and age. I want to recognize and thank all the partners that are continuing to help us through our urban air mobility maturation work, and we look forward to the continued collaboration in the future. And speaking of that future, I can't wait for the time that we can look back and say, yeah, we were involved in this work in its infancy.